Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe a little Tweedledoo down from St. Al's.
Tweedledoo. Oh, we're not. Myself. I didn't mean
You're
to.
cutting in and out big time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's upsetting. That's why I'm sitting on the floor, because I can't, there's no room in my house that I can sit in and guarantee that no one will walk in screaming or something other than my own room. But my room is in the furthest corner, and the connection is not the best. Is it bad right now? Can you hear me?
Live right now?
Yeah, I mean, you're fine.
We are live right now, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Hello out there.
Hi.
Hey, hey.
There's one
What's up?
there's one person watching now, and it's me. So
Oh.
I think I'm also watching right now.
Hey, at least we got two, right?
He's here. We got two. Oh, I guess we should do something with the link. Oh,
I just
Kevin.
put it on.
Kevin, you're so
Kev-
good. All right.
Am I there?
Oh, hi.
Dan's got this like
Nice.
fade in.
That was pretty cool.
That was really
Sorry
cool.
about
That was pretty fancy. Did you set that up on purpose?
I did not. No, I
Oh,
just
guys, I don't know how this
figured out
headband
on the
situation.
internet. So I think I'm good to go. Hopefully it
All
doesn't.
right. Cool. Let's pray.
Let's pray.
Who's going to lead us in prayer?
I can lead us. I have a prayer prepared.
Nice.
This one
Tim,
invokes Fulton
that's
Sheen,
awesome.
he's not officially a canonized saint yet, but we can still ask for his intercession. So, yeah.
Sick. I
In the
love
name
it.
of the Father,
All
and
right.
the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Eternal Father, you alone grant us every blessing in heaven and on earth through the redemptive mission of your
I
divine
got some
Son,
serious
Jesus
lag
Christ.
going here.
I'm just going to continue. And by the working of the Holy Spirit, if it be according to your will, glorify
Yeah,
your
just
servant,
go
Archbishop
ahead.
Fulton Sheen, by granting the favor. We now request through this prayer intercession. We pray humbly for the repose of the souls that have been affected by the coronavirus, for those of us who are seeking community, especially in the Chicagoland young adult area, and for all intentions that we offer up to the Blessed Virgin Mary. We pray, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
Mother
now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Sinners
In the name
now.
of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Cool, guys. So, week 3. I'm pumped.
We here.
This prayer pod. And so the messages begin. All right. Cool. So you guys tell me, like, what'd you all do this weekend?
Not a
know
whole
what
heck of a
y'all did this
lot. I
week.
got excited for the Jordan documentary that was last night. So watched 2 hours of that. I want right down here, I want it to say current Chicago resident. That was the best moment last night. Barack Obama's on talking about the Bulls team, and it says underneath Barack Obama, all it says is former Chicago resident.
Apparently they did. Bill Clinton was the
What?
same way, like a former Arkansas resident too.
Are you
Yeah, that's right.
kidding?
That's right.
Yeah.
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 Are they
Awesome.
like trolling? Why would they do it that way?
Because it's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So that was my weekend.
All right, cool.
Can you guys hear me?
That was,
Yeah, we got you, Dan.
yeah.
Nice. All right, we're good.
So that was the highlight of your weekend was watching
by
that
far.
documentary?
By far. The hype was up to here. It exceeded the hype.
It was really good.
It was insane.
Wow.
really, really good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm excited for next Sunday. What can I say?
Any profound themes in there, or like a prevailing philosophy that you noticed in there at all? Just like that can
Michael Jordan's the GOAT.
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't agree with that, come at me in the comments. Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all
Have
time.
me in the
Hang
comments.
on, I got LeBron on the other line. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, I see. You're taking a break from your color marketer.
That's
You-
right.
you gotta-
Hello, this is sparkosoft.com. May I take your video conference? Yes, I do have Tim here.
Hey, you're gonna get sued.
Hey, in my defense, I upgraded the headgear. Okay, so
It's actually pretty cool.
And I noticed the Sparkosoft it's reading correctly. It's not like mirror flip this time.
That is true.
it
is
is.
an improvement.
No,
In
no,
the
no. I'm
world,
gonna
Tim.
fix that. There we go.
Hey, there we go.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
Awesome. Okay.
Very nice.
Sparkohard.com. All right, let's move on. All right, what are we talking about tonight, everybody?
Who
you were
else's
trying to
highlight of their
bring
weekend was
Michael Jordan to
Yeah, I feel like everyone's highlight, or at least 3 of us, I can say for sure, our highlight of the weekend was that
John?
documentary.
I didn't even know it was on until you guys were talking about it yesterday, and
Oh,
then
jeez.
I was at work and guys at the firehouse were talking about it too. So I saw a little bit of it.
The entire city
It
was
was
talking
great.
about it. I'm sure. Yeah.
Michael
I
Jordan.
wasn't talking about it.
Well, you're not in the city yet, right, kid?
Cool. All right. So we got topics. I'm kind of pumped about this. I gotta figure out like a smooth way to transition into these things instead of just being like, this is what we're gonna talk about. So it is apparent that while we're all at home during quarantine, we are consuming media. Zach is on the move. We're consuming medias, whether it's like content created by Word on Fire or like LifeSite News or any of the other websites that we might be on during this time. So Kevin brought this up a couple of weeks ago. I think this is a great topic and one that
Of course it was.
definitely needs to call for discussion. What, Kev? What'd you say?
I thought of it, so of course it's a great concept.
Yeah, so it's, of course, so just it's inherently good because it came from the mind of Kevin Grigas. John, stop. Anyway, Kevin, I guess you should provide the intro because it was your idea. So what are your initial thoughts? Give me your why do you feel like this is an important topic? Discerning content, curating content that we can consume.
Yeah, well, I mean, just evidenced by the fact that anyone right now can go and put anything on the internet. And right now, that's pretty much, there's probably more content that's being produced than it's actually being consumed.
That's an absolute affirmative. Yes.
And
This
so,
right
I'm
now.
laughing because quite literally we are. I was just gonna say that we are quite literally anyone putting something on the internet right
Correct.
now. Anyway, Kevin, continue your thought, please.
I mean, and of course, all this conversation is like, this is what we're doing right here is the pinnacle of the media of the content that could be out there. So we're setting the standard right now of how that's how great we are. We're the standard. Just want to make that clear. But there's just so much out there, and I mean, I get when we're on Slack, there's just a lot of things that get shared on Slack that you're just like I really wish you weren't reading that right now. Sometimes it's LifeSite News, sometimes it's just Pastor Bob's blog, sometimes it's all these sorts of things. You're like, why are you reading that, and why are you using this as a source? But it it dawned on me of like, what am I using to judge, who am I to say that Pastor Bob is not the most reliable source on this, and why should you be going to Word on Fire or Father Mike Schmidt, Ascension Press? Why is that a more reputable source than
Kevin Grigas?
Well, yeah,
Or Pastor
right, or Pastor Bob, or Church Militant. I mean, like all these things, and it's and obviously we're talking about different levels of things. Because Church Militant is filling a different role than Word on Fire or Ascension Presents. But why do I personally prefer Catholic News Agency to get my Catholic news as opposed to LifeSite and things like that? So I just I threw it out there because I think it's just how do we? There's so much being put out there. Like how are you guys actually deciding what you put into your brain? Because it's I know there's I also and I think this we might get into this more later, but like I know there was for a period, I know I'm still guilty of this occasionally. I'm much better at it than I used to be, but like hate consuming content. I know there's one
That, yeah.
right. I used to like it's on Twitter. This was the most clear. It was like I would hate follow people on Twitter, especially sports accounts, and like I'd be like I would check in, like I'll be watching a Cubs game. I'd check in to see like what these accounts are saying, and I knew they were going to be posting stupid takes that I disagree with, and I followed them so I could go on and see how wrong they were, and I would just sit there and be like, oh my gosh, these idiots, and like coming up with responses in my head. I'm like, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to sit here and be mad. And that's just, it's not good for me. It's not good for anyone. And so I don't do that anymore at least on Twitter. And I really try to filter out a lot of sites and things like that. With the help, sometimes it's with the help of friends saying like, hey, you need to stop. You actually need to stop going to this site and reposting it so you can dunk on it. Like, it was funny at first, and now it's
that's the same thing. Like you see that on Twitter all the time, right? Like every single account doing the same thing to the same article. And it's just like at a certain point, what's healthy about that? And, isn't it better to, instead of making the same joke that 20 other people made, maybe just block that site so you don't have to see their garbage takes anymore? I mean,
Yep.
I think it's hard too when so many of the websites out there, like Kevin, you named a few different ones, but it seems like the integrity of each individual site fluctuates so much too, depending on what's being talked about. Like
Right.
There really isn't any sort of golden standard, even among, if we're talking about Catholic media, you would think that truth would be, the guidepost, but so I think
Of the highest priority.
very often emotions are far more of a dictator in these things than, fact.
well, and you always somehow have to get to, everyone has an agenda, and sometimes that has a negative connotation, but if it's a reputable source, their agenda is just to get news out there and just to report what's going on, right? If they're completely unbiased, but somehow we have to find out what the agenda is of every news source we consume. So I think that's the real tough part, because once you find out their agenda, maybe they're not 100%. I mean, no news source is great 100% of the time, right? But if you can kind of read through where they're trying to take you and learn to pull out the pieces that might be worthwhile, I think that's an approach I've been taking for a while now myself, because some of the Catholic sources, obviously, when it comes to certain church inner workings, whether it's scandals or whatnot, maybe they do a really good job on that, but then they're just way too I don't know what the term is, but they're just really harsh on liturgy, for example. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't read certain types of articles from a website versus cutting them out entirely. But I think that's the hardest part.
I think something that's like important to pay attention to is like the way that the articles are being written. And you can typically tell like the style of the website by, or I'm using the wrong word. You can typically tell how an article was written by the style it's written in. So like CNA, for example, they have like actual reporters doing actual journalism where they're like going out and like interviewing people personally, and they're like actively like looking up resources and like they're doing active journalism, whereas like LifeSite News is really more of a blog where they just regurgitate news that other organizations have created and put together, but with their own spin on it. And they might include, they might have original stories. They do actually have original stories, but their stories, even the stories that are original, are written in more of like a blog format, which is always opinion based, and it always has like a twist of like an angle, like you said, John. And I think that that's where it becomes more important to look at the actual individual who wrote the article, to kind of know. You have to then discern like, okay, what's this person's background, or like in what context are they writing this, and what are they what's their angle? I don't know. Does that make sense? Like LifeSite is not in the same class of online Catholic websites as CNA, or like even like, or like the National Catholic Register. Those are like actual like journalistic publications. Know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that's you laid it out well as far as like the differences, but that doesn't necessarily stop you from like saying, well, I get my news from here, but I'm going to go here for
For sure.
the opinion pieces. And I mean, me personally, I've cut out a lot of both. I mean, I hate to use right and left when it comes to the church, but I've tried to cut out some of the far right and the far left things of the church. So church militant and LifeSite on one side, National Catholic Reporter on the other, and try to cut both those out, because while they aren't, I agree, they're not necessarily doing what CNA is doing there. It just, I don't need that. And the question is does anyone need it? Is it healthy for anyone? Is it healthy for the church? That made it as a different question. I guess for you guys personally, just to start there, like where do you, what do you how are you deciding like what you're reading right now?
Yeah, so for me, just because I think probably more than the average person I run into, I kind of avoid a lot of media that's out there just because I realize that the effect that a lot of it might have on me. And so one of the discernment things that I'll use when I'm looking at media is it's pretty easy to determine like it's pretty easy to see like where's this coming from. And I mean like even like in a spiritual sense, like, is this coming out of fear? Is this coming out of hope? Is this coming out of encouragement? You can tell a lot about someone's agenda, even if they don't have a specific goal in mind, that if this is coming out of fear, then what they're doing is perhaps sharing this as a way to alleviate their own fear, or perhaps feel better by getting other people afraid. Now that's a pretty big presumption, but it's pretty easy a lot of times to determine, at least at that kind of a level, like, what is this, like, where is this coming from in someone's heart? And I think as important too is like, what is this doing to me? And so the reason I've been so against going after, and that I've been even reading the stuff that's like conspiracy theory-esque, and I can't objectively say whether it's true or not. I just don't have that kind of knowledge. But what I do know is that a lot of reasons, one of the big reasons that conspiracy theory and that kind of stuff is shared is because there's an underlying fear that's going on there. And I just don't think that's good. Like for me to be reading, I don't think it's good for me to be sharing. Especially at a time like now, like hope is such a very precious thing. Because like there are some people who just like don't handle this very well. And so yeah, just with media, I just try to gauge that and then just, like try to discern that even if I'm not familiar with whoever the author of the media is.
Well, I think you probably hit the nail on the head for me personally, is like, what does this website do to me, and how does it make me feel? Like, I think Kevin alluded to it a little bit with the National Catholic Reporter, but that like, if I keep going to the same website and I just get angry every single time I read an article, like, I mean,
like why
there are people who need to know like everything that's out there, but I'm not one of them. Like, it's not my job to, be in tune with everything that's out there. So
100%.
Yeah, if it makes me less charitable to the author, like I think that's a real danger to get into, is to start like when you don't agree with and even rightfully so, if you rightfully don't agree with what this author is saying, but because it's just somebody online, not someone that you know personally, it's very easy to just start being very uncharitable towards that author for their opinions.
Well, it's easy to use different news sources as a punching bag too, just to make yourself feel more secure wherever you are. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of all over the map on this thing because, like, you know, you brought up National Catholic Reporter. That's definitely on one end of the spectrum, and then you have Church Militant LifeSite News on the other end. And there's actually, you know, some others that would probably be closer to that in the spectrum, depending on how you view things. There's like 1 Peter 5. You know, there's all sorts of other Catholic news agencies if you're just talking about Catholic news. But then even beyond that, how do you? The problem I always run into, honestly, is I'll go in cycles of like gluttony of news material. And basically every time I do, I just become depressed and miserable about everything because, I mean,
the sky's falling, right?
Yeah, the sky's falling. And that's kind of, you know, show me a news agency nowadays that's super fair and super balanced about everything that they put out. You know, there's very, very few, very few.
CNA.
Yeah, I mean, CNA does a really good job. Like, you could typically read an article without, you know,
CNA is
to
the
go hide under a
most,
rock.
they are the most journalistic of the ones we've mentioned, I would say. Like, they actually follow AP style format. Yeah.
But it's hard though too, because there's other agencies, you know, any one of them that we just named, both ends of the spectrum, if you will. You know, there's times when both of them put out legit stuff, you know, like I'd say like Church Militant's done some really good work on, you know, on some of like the stuff in their diocese. They've like uncovered some stuff that was, you know, pretty bad and being hidden. But, you know, should you go through their news roster? I mean, like I get emails from them and other Catholic news agencies, and every time you read through it, it's like there's no semblance of hope whatsoever, you know?
Yeah, that's why I think there's a discernment not only of maybe what the site is or like the newspaper, but also a site perhaps of author, of article, and even like the content in the article. Yeah, I mean, and it's not like you can nitpick like, well, what is stuff in here do I like and what stuff do I not like? But you know, I guess you have to just discern it at those many levels.
And sometimes too, I really think there's something too about depending on your state of life, you know, everybody kind of like the common quip that people will throw out at you if, you know, you're not super up to date on things. You know, everybody says that you got to be up to date on current events, but really, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that's true for most people because number one, you know, what difference does that make? Number
it's not,
two,
yes. All right, keep going.
Crap. I'm missing the Jordan talk here.
Well, no, I definitely agree with
stuff.
I agree with you.
So rude, Zach. They're having side conversations.
I can multitask, okay?
I can't. I'm super distracted.
I agree with you 100% about that, Zach. Like you're saying, what does it matter if I am up to date on the latest in Catholic news, Catholic gossip, even most of the time, right?
Right.
What am I going to do about
Catholic gossip for sure.
Yeah.
Well, how does it affect your prayer life? How does it affect your practical life?
If it affects it at all, and negatively, right? Negatively.
Yeah, I mean, you know, most of the time, I use the example sitting at the table in the firehouse every single day. You get there, ongoing shift, off-going shift, sitting at the table. Everybody's drinking coffee, and the news is always on. Everybody's watching the news, and I can tell you, the people on one side of the table who are one end of the political spectrum are not going to have any constructive dialogue with the other people who are on the other end of the political spectrum. You know, like it really doesn't make a difference most of the time, you know, to help anything constructive along, honestly. For me, I mean, most of the time, it's not that I don't care about what's going on in the world, but, you know, what difference is it going to make?
Dan and I had a very hard conversation about this a couple of weeks ago. And I think, Dan, like you effectively, yeah, he's laughing. Yeah. We had a hard conversation about this, and he effectively convicted me about what he's saying, that we have to look at the intent of the author and ask ourselves questions, like very specifically in this instance, the question of, is this person trying to invoke fear in people? And I would even add to that and say, is this person trying to invoke fear without justification or without reason? And actually, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not the right way to say that, because I think that, I don't know, in that conversation, I had shared with you that like, I was a journalism major in college. Did you guys know that? And I like thought my whole life I was going to be a journalist. And then for a year before I, just wait for this one. I'm so pumped to see your faces when I tell you this. For a year before I did my Illinois Right to Life job, I was writing clickbait for Sarah Palin for a year. And
yes.
I was writing like Tea Party-esque clickbait articles for a full year. I did that full time. That was my job. And I sat in my house and I regurgitated news and wrote clickbait headlines for a year.
Oh no. Oh no.
So when you're discerning the article and the author, and you see that Mary Kate Knorr byline, just pass over it.
Thanks for joining us tonight, folks.
You can Google me. It all comes up. I am an extremely Googleable person. So, but the thing that, and I will say, like, I will absolutely say that, like, there were moments in that job that I was like, there is a moral line here, and I really tried not to cross it. Like, I did have a couple of conversations I remember with my editor that I was like, I don't want to write that article, or I don't want to talk about this or whatever. But I think that it also, and like to push back on some of what's being said, it also really was like such an enlightening experience for me, because I really felt like I'm not doing journalism in the way that it's like classically done. But I'm, from my personal perspective, felt like I was only writing what was true, and putting that information out there and putting it out there for an audience that was consuming it in huge numbers. And I think, and again, I'm not justifying what I was saying, but the point I'm trying to make is like, it kind of helped me realize that we have to be willing to like ask, are you guys? No.
You're doing a great job, Mary Kate. Keep going.
Keep going.
Stop it. Get that out of here.
No one knows what you're talking about.
I can't even see it. Stop. What was I saying? You guys are, I'm losing my train of thought.
Worst.
So
I think,
right.
Okay, what I was getting to, I don't know if this is what I was saying, but what I was getting to is like, I personally am very passionate about truth. That is something that is really important to me, is like discerning truth and like arriving at truth and then knowing what it is. And so I think that there's like a healthy balance there in terms of like, what truth do we have a right to, or is like meant for us, and what other things are like beyond our capacity to know or to understand. And I think we have to like, there has to be like some level of like personal accountability of like, I just don't need to go this far. Like, I don't need to go on these like Reddit. I don't need to go down these like Reddit rabbit holes about like conspiracy theories with coronavirus. I don't need to do that.
That's when you learn what's really going on.
I do. It's not good.
That's news that you can use day to day.
Yeah, and so that's like
I love thousands of uneducated people talking about things. That's how you know you're going to get the best quality information.
That's why Wikipedia is so great.
That's right. It can be edited by anybody in the world.
You know, you're getting the best possible information.
But like okay, but that's the other thing I was going to say is like, on the other hand, as human beings who like have access to the internet, we actually have a great capacity to do our own research on things. And you guys know that I do that because I talk about it constantly, about all the Googling and like research I'm doing on the Gates Foundation, for example, all the time. So like, I think that would be what I would say.
All right. So how do you separate that type of information? You know, things about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation,
Yeah.
you know, their agenda, you know, the way that their corporation essentially, you know, the things that they fund abroad and here
Yeah.
domestically. Like, how do you discern whether or not that's factual information? You know, basically, I'm saying, like, how do you get behind theories like that, but then filter out, you know, things that are talked about within the church, stuff like that, you know, from some of these super right-wing sites or even the left-wing sites, you know, if you dare.
I guess, well, I guess I don't understand your question totally. Like, what do you mean separate them from?
I guess, I mean, like, what's the watermark for you determining whether something's legitimate, you know?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would say you're totally crazy for thinking that Bill and Melinda
Yeah.
Gates sterilized people. you
Yeah.
know?
There are people who do think I'm crazy.
Oh yeah, of course.
For thinking
You know,
that.
we're all
But
crazy.
so,
I
okay,
think
yeah.
you're
So
correct,
here's the
Mary.
thing. So I get people on Instagram. I am
Good
correct.
way to
I'm
open
right.
up
They do
the
it.
good way to
Anyway.
open up the sentence. People on Instagram.
People on Instagram. No, no, stop. I'm not.
My social
Guys.
media people love me. Why can't you guys?
Oh my gosh, Dan. No, that's not what I was gonna say.
I know.
Can I finish a sentence really quick?
Yes.
So no, what I was gonna say is that there are people on Instagram who are like really obsessed with this whole like QAnon thing. Have we talked about this? Did we talk about this in the first one?
We didn't, but I love it.
Okay, is this something worth broaching?
Go for
Probably
it. Why
not.
not?
There is a
What else do we
major.
gotta do?
That's
I
right.
don't know, because I'm afraid of spreading false information because this is a conspiracy theory that I actually
Oh, it's
don't buy
conspiracy
into.
theory, whatever. Yeah.
Well, as long as you
those actually
qualify it,
exist.
right?
Conspiracy theories that I don't. Dan, you're muted, but I can see you laughing at me. Yeah. Those actually do exist. There are
On purpose.
conspiracy theories that I do not subscribe to, and this is one of them. So there's this whole conspiracy theory out there right now about QAnon. Q is basically, according to the conspiracy, I don't even know if this stuff is fact, like the details I'm about to describe. So according to the conspiracy theory, Q is like the highest level of like security clearance for the military. And there is a few individuals who are part of this like top secret military operation through the with the Trump administration, that they're trying to bring down the child trafficking ring. It's like this global child trafficking ring that is that's like related to the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And so the whole thing with QAnon is that there are these like high level military officials who are using 4chan and some of these like, you know, like dark web websites to share this information with people so as to like ease them into the truth about what's really going on in the world. And the whole thing with coronavirus is that they're claiming that coronavirus is like the left's or like this cult of world leaders and celebrities that are like it's this global cult. And the whole idea is that coronavirus is basically them, like they intentionally released it out into the world
Here we go.
to respond to the fact that the Trump administration is is it like on the verge of making some major global indictments. Basically that's the SparkNotes version. And there's like a lot more details, and you look at this stuff and like read you read this stuff and listen to the videos people have made about it, and you're like, they are stretching this so hard. Like, this is not legit. I don't know. That's the thing, I guess, is we have to have a well-formed conscience about these things so that we can have an intuition about like, you should be able to hear something that is like vehemently a lie. And there should be some part of us that's like, really?
Yeah.
Are you sure? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know how on a practical level to like tell people how to get to that point, but it's very clear that there are people out there who don't have that. And I think, Dan, like what you were saying, maybe it's like this fear thing that they're like, I'm so afraid and I need answers and I need like some sort of explanation that I can grasp onto. So I'm just going to grab onto the closest thing, even if it's like crazy, like just like crazy town. And so I think with all this stuff, I don't know. Anyway, what was I getting at? You can't verify any of that stuff. Like all of that stuff is totally unverifiable. And no, you literally can't verify any of it. Gates Foundation stuff, you can verify all of that stuff. And you can verify it by looking at grants that have been doled out by the Great Gates Foundation, statements made by the bishops in Africa and in a lot of these other countries where the Gates Foundation actively has vaccination campaigns. You can verify these stories by, but just like all you have to do is look at the relationships that exist with the Gates Foundation, and they're very public. Like half of the stuff that I have a problem with the Gates Foundation is stuff that's literally on their website. It's not hard to verify. But
that kind of stuff is like openly talked about very brazenly now, politically and otherwise too.
Totally.
So, yeah.
100%. So that's my.
No, that's good. Yeah. I was just asking you to flesh out on that.
I'm reading the side comments.
Some people don't draw any distinction between those things.
I think you made a really good point about kind of like building this base of knowledge, right? This ability to be able to read something and have something internally kind of go off to say, okay, that can't be right. And I mean, I think in regards to the church and kind of my own personal journey with Catholic media, actually, so Dan got us all talking about our conversions and our reversions on Slack this last couple of days. So
man,
we had some
Slack
great
hype man now.
Yeah,
who
right.
is this new person?
Zach, you're up next, man. You can do it while we're doing this. Log in.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
If we start crying, it's because Zach's story got posted.
That's right.
I didn't know how to find where I freaking posted last when I got back in Slack, so I gave up pretty quick.
Yeah, fair enough. So in undergrad, I kind of like came back to the faith a little bit more than I had. I was raised Catholic, but a lot of then what I tasked myself with doing was just learning more because I realized I didn't know a lot about the faith. So like I actually, of course, start off with the catechism whenever I would have questions and go there. But it's really funny. Maybe I'm wrong about this and you can correct me, but I think like some of these websites that we started talking about were actually ones that I somewhat frequented back then. So this was what I was maybe 8 years ago or so. So I don't know if 1 Peter 5 or whatever, if it's gotten worse since then or.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think unfortunately a lot of those sites, a lot of Catholic sites have followed the trend of I would say in the last 10 years, I mean, I think we've seen like there's been a lot of polarization in news, and the Catholic sites have really followed that. And in order to get your name out there, you have to make kind of more and more ridiculous claims.
Yeah.
So like I remember when LifeSite News, like that's what they reported on. They reported on pro-life issues, and that was it. And now they comment about all sorts of stuff, and like occasionally there's some pro-life stuff, but oftentimes it's stuff to sow, and maybe they're not intending to do it, but it just sows division. And there's a comment on here from good old Father Rocket Dan. There's a demonic influence and a division that some of these sites create on both the left and the right.
Yeah.
And it serves no good. So like, it's one of those things where for me, I don't think anyone like even if you have a good kind of barometer for sorting things out, it's just not good for anyone to be on these sites, because oftentimes, like you mentioned, their blogs, or they started as blogs, and so they don't really need to stick to some sort of like journalistic integrity per se, but they just sow a ton of division, because either you're going on like you're either going on to get angry about it, or you're going on to like, and Sam Dan said this early on, is like, you know, the other side of the coin is like going on to like just live in this echo chamber, like all like what you think is being like reinforced, and you're hearing these things again and again. You're like, oh man, I'm totally onto something. Like, you know, Pope Francis was put into the church as like he's actually looking to take down the church from within, and like the infiltration stuff with I don't even want to say his name on here, but like it's what good is it serving the church? Like even if like some of the stuff that like church militant is putting out there is like true, it's causing so much, and all those sites, and even on the ones on the left and the right, like it just sows so much division.
And they have to know what they're doing, right? Like I honestly, maybe a few years back, I kind of was a little bit naive. I don't know. And I was thinking to myself, well, they're trying to get to the truth themselves, but at this point, no, I can't really think that anymore. And
well, they could be trying to get to the truth, but I mean, it's there's a version that they like. And so the other side of the thing is, because I agree with Dan very much in discerning, there's a personal, this like kind of like, what is this doing to me? And when I was thinking about this today, there's like a, there's something that I don't want to read it because it's causing fear or anger or resentment or something like that. And I don't like to read it because it's challenging me or it's making me think about something too hard. And that latter thing, we shouldn't be running from that. Just because it challenges me and challenges me what I view on certain things that's a piece where I'd say like, no, I need to stick with that and see. Now maybe I get to the end, I'm like, oh yeah, that really was, it was challenging me because it was wrong. And it just, I
wouldn't you say though that, oh, sorry, Kev.
No, go.
No, I was going to say, wouldn't you say though that logic of being challenged could apply in the opposite direction as well? Because I mean, I don't know. There's so many, personally, like I like some of the stuff that 1 Peter 5 has put out. Some of the stuff that they put out also, I really haven't liked. I think all of these sites and in sources at one time or another, even currently, will put out really good stuff that would certainly challenge people within the church to become more holy if applied in the correct measure. Not like as a, let's bash that. I mean, like being totally honest, I'm one who's very much guilty of becoming super negative and just getting into the bash mentality. Like, why aren't things this way? Why was this done? This, that, and the other thing, factual things. But I think there is still good information to be gleaned from some of these websites and news sources. I don't think you can throw the baby out with the bathwater all the time.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of,
honestly, I have a hard time with this. I'm kind of in between because I'm with you, man. Like sometimes like, it's definitely not good to read if all it does is make you miserable, right? But sometimes there are hard truths. And I'm not saying anything in specific to any one site, any one article, because there are some things in the church right now that are pretty bad.
Yeah,
there's some things in the political system that are pretty bad, and
I think that's what makes it hard. And I think that's where the personal, like we have to be really prioritize forming our own consciences, because the other issue that I think comes up is you'll get people who are like, there's nothing wrong with the National Catholic Reporter. We should be exposing ourselves to their like oppositional viewpoints, and we should be considering all these things. And like, I think the very clear answer for the 6 of us would be no, but that's not necessarily the way that other people see it. And it's hard to make that practical,
So there's a story of John Paul II. He was walking out of one of the chapels or one of the churches in the Vatican, and he's carrying the Communist Manifesto with him. And another cardinal runs in. This is when he's still Cardinal Wojtyła. And another cardinal runs in and he's like, "What on earth are you doing? Like, you can't be reading that." And he's like, "I assure you that like my reading this is for purely holy reasons, and there was no, and like as we know, like there was no one who understood communism better than John Paul II, and like he studied it and he exposed himself to a lot of a lot of BS, so that he would know the other person's perspective. So
Fulton was the same way.
Yeah,
I
and
so believe in that.
Exactly. So now there's a little bit of a nuance here. So there's such thing as like, okay, people are spewing a bunch of lies and they're trying to like scare you, intimidate you, and like that's what communism was in Russia at that time. And I guess, you know, Communist Manifesto and a lot of kind of like the messages that go with that. But at the same time, John Paul II was able to be like, okay, I know what's true. I have the givens given my faith. I know what's true. And so with that, I can peel apart all the lies that are in here. Now, he was also an intellectual genius, right? So is it fair for us to be able to do that kind of thing with every article we come across? Oh, heck no. So like, but we can't discern everything, but we should be able to approach sources and be like, okay, like that's not true. I'm moving on with that. Okay. Like, but you know, there might be something underneath it that might be good. But also in terms of like websites and just stuff like that, if a site is really like aggravating you, and even if there's like there's the occasional like really good thing that's in there, is a little bit of truth worth, you know, 1,000 lies and a negative attitude? Like Satan's mentality is not to tell an outright lie, right? It's to distort the truth and to get you to believe and to feel a certain way, right? That's what he does in Adam and Eve. Yeah.
Amen.
God.
Yeah.
You know, it's not God. He didn't say outright like,
preach it.
You know, it's just like, oh yeah, you know, let's get you to think this way. And so just, you know, just leave it alone, really, unless you're JP2 and you're a genius like Tim Berryhill or, you know, John Trainer.
Yeah. The raw pursuit of knowledge for knowledge's sake is not.
Yeah.
It only leads in one direction. It's, you know, it's never good.
For sure.
Actually, okay, so this is interesting. I could tell you guys a little bit, because this is kind of more of a personal thing for me, especially relating to this subject with pretty extreme sites and beliefs and everything. So my reversion back into the Catholic Church was actually, very ironically enough, through being a sedevacantist, essentially. I came across all of that stuff when I was really searching for truth and like really kind of examining different religions, and in Christianity in particular, I came to that point in my life where, you know, like you hit rock bottom and you're really wondering, why have I been forced to go to mass every Sunday? Why am I still doing this? What's the difference between going to mass and then going to, you know, my buddy's mega church sort of thing? You know, why not just believe in Jesus? And then compare that to all other religions. But basically, I fell into sedevacantism because I was so interested in the pursuit of knowledge in church history that it goes down this long, winding rabbit trail of basically saying, you know, Pope John the 23rd was a Freemason, and, you know, like all of these things that you could never verify, right?
Right.
I mean, of course, like if there was evidence of these things, it would be a totally different situation. But, you know, essentially, like the whole sedevacantist position rests on, it's like, you know, it's like the shakiest foundation of all time. You're essentially risking your immortal soul on a theory, you know, on unvalidated theories.
Totally.
And it's the most miserable thing.
Why?
There's no salvation for anybody. The church is done and over with, which also directly contradicts the Bible. Essentially, the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. But you know, to go down that path, like that is the most like desolate and horrible situation ever once you get into that line of thinking. And I do believe, you know, Satan has his foot very clearly, you know, that's another source of division within the church. You can go way too far in either extreme.
Well, I think that's kind of what Dan did a good job alluding to, the idea of fear, just trying to find, I mean, like we talked about this with coronavirus stuff, right? And the idea that if I can just find an answer that I can rationalize, even if it doesn't have evidence behind it necessarily, but if I can find a way to make it make sense for me, then I'm going to latch onto it regardless because of how it makes me feel, right? It gives me some semblance of control that I might not feel like I have otherwise.
Right.
So I think that's the danger, and sounds like kind of what you kind of went through there.
Yeah,
the
a
sense
little
of
bit.
control is a big issue. Going back to Martin Luther and his question of justification, it was almost seems like salvation for him was kind of like one of those control things. I need to know whether I'm saved right now, and it's almost, you can always kind of sense like it possibility. And this also goes into certain media platforms here. Is like you look at, I mean, possibly like Michael Voris, like he might actually have a legitimate like anxiety disorder where he needs to feel this kind of control, this kind of negativity to make himself kind of feel that kind of control.
Yeah.
And I think it's a similar kind of motivation with Martin Luther. He's like, I need to know that I am saved. And so you kind of see that reverberating through modern Catholic
That
Church.
control, I think that control factor is huge. And I think that, like, again, Instagram vaccines, there's a huge community of moms on social media who are obsessed with talking about vaccines. And I think that control piece comes into play, that we, at a certain level, we have to be willing to say, like, you know what, I can't control whether or not vaccines are evil. I can only do what I can do. And like, I think that that's certainly not to say we shouldn't ask questions. It's not to say that we shouldn't, be skeptical and be like thinking human beings who do our own research and who like have these important conversations with people who also have well-formed consciences. I think all of those things are important. There's a very real like trust factor here of like, this is all very much outside of my control. And I have to like just trust that God, it's within the plan, because
Boom!
it's an element at play.
I saw it unmute. I was getting ready for something coming from Dan. Yeah, I mean,
That's it right there, man.
Vaccines are probably a huge example that we all can kind of point to. It's this idea that I can look at something that gave my child autism. Like, it's this specific thing. It was that shot that gave my child autism, as opposed to
Totally. Oh, and like,
I mean, it's heartbreaking.
My heart
right?
so goes out to those people. Yeah. Like, I get it. I get why you want to understand why you felt like one minute your kid was fine and the next minute your kid wasn't fine. Like, yeah. I so get that. But like, you just can't. Like, we can't know. I don't know. I think that too, like, those are the types of things. And like, even for me, I brought vaccines up again. I talk about vaccines a lot. It's because it's a really hard issue for me and I really struggle with it and I want to understand it. And so how I try to respond to that, and I think it's how we're called to respond to all things, is I try to take it to prayer and like say to God, like, if you want me to understand some of these things and you want me to like have a grasp of this information, you have to present me with what it is you want me to know. And if you don't, give me the grace and the trust to let it go. Just like, let it go. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it. Surrender. And I think that's the difficult thing with any one of these specific topics we're talking about, any like extremely polarized topic, essentially. Like, the most difficult thing about all of these topics is that it's all gray area. It's not black and white. And like, I look at my personal experience, all I was looking for during that time in my life was black and white, something to say like, this is right, this is wrong, because up to that point, like, everything, anything went, and there was no right or wrong. And so I think that's a big part of it for people. I think that's a huge part of the situation. It's just, it's really difficult to live in the gray, unless you have a very well-formed faith life,
Yeah.
That's how we get through life, essentially.
Yeah. If we knew everything, we would not trust God, because
There'd
we
be no plan.
we wouldn't need God.
Right.
But like, Zach, you're nailing it on the head. And then the next step from there is, do you accept God saying, God with, not withholding, but just like God not telling you what you want to know? Because you could be like, all right, God, like, I want to know this. Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Yep.
Like, okay. I mean, right. Like, we naturally are like, well, that stinks because I'd like to know. So like, it's another level of faith to trust that, or to accept that.
Right.
Yep. Zach, you gave me that surrender novena back in what month was that? October, maybe? When was that?
Was it
I
then?
recently saw it in our text messages and I was like,
Yeah.
dang, I forgot that I did that. And I'm not gonna lie, hey, that's like an undoer of knots type of novena. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
it's huge.
Like,
That's a
dang.
beast novena for sure.
Will you? I'm gonna post that when I post this
Yeah,
audio,
definitely.
because that novena is. Have you guys heard of this? The surrender novena? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it kind of rocked my world a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's very
It's
good.
All right, so
freaking
John hasn't.
awesome.
Okay. Everybody else is all over it. John's
I'll
up
text
here.
it
It's
to
like,
you,
oh, nope,
John.
nope.
It's like it's basically it's the perfect mantra, if you will, for daily life. You know, do it as a
Yeah.
novena or just read it every day,
Yeah.
and that's by and large. I mean, that's one of my greatest areas of struggle. Obviously, I'm sure it's probably a common human condition. But yeah, that's a huge part of it for sure.
It's kind of funny going back to the video that got posted on Slack. I think it was yesterday or day before. The one that we've all seen. It's not about the nail, right? I wonder if there's some similar gender differences with discerning media, or like we're talking about how we want to like know the answer. Like I don't know, Mary Kate, do you think there's a difference in how men consume media versus how women consume media?
I love that question, and I wish Dan was here because I feel like we were literally just, I don't know, he and I go back and forth about this stuff all the time. I do, but I think that that's interesting. I guess I haven't thought too much about how I suspect that men consume media. I think in general, women like grasp at knowledge and control, because I think that's what Eve did in the garden. Like, I don't know. I just have a tendency to like look at Eve and ask myself like what can Eve's sins? Eve committed, I've said this before. One of you said it today. I think it's true. I repeat stories like 6 times over. I only have so many stories, you guys. Adam and Eve, Eve committed 5 sins in the garden. Adam committed 9. And I think that we can learn a lot about ourselves by looking at the sins that they committed. And I think that Eve in particular has really passed on this temptation in women to like grasp at things just in general, because I think it's natural for women to receive. But if we aren't open to receiving, I think that the temptation becomes like actually trying to take and actually grasping at things. And so with information, absolutely. I think that, I think 2 things actually. I think women grasp at information, and maybe men do too. I don't know. You guys can say what you think about this, but I think women grasp at information. I also think that women, like seek that security. Like women are we need that security and that stability, and we need like to know that things are safe. That's been one of the number one things that I've seen like women sharing on social media is stuff about like, like speaking into this idea that women feel really unsafe during this time. And like you'll see people posting like affirmations of like, I am safe, I am protected, I am loved. Like that's such a women thing, and it's because that's something women struggle with. And I think that information is one of the ways that they help themselves feel safe. But I mean, I also think it's the human condition that like we just don't trust God. Father Mike Schmitz he had an awesome homily. I bet it was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe, that he posted. And I remember listening to it and I was like, dang, that is it. Is actually, I think it might be a Divine Mercy homily. It might have been a Divine Mercy Sunday that he talked about how the story of Exodus is really just the story of God trying to convince the Israelites to trust him. And like over and over, like that's actually pretty much the story of humanity, is God telling us, trust me, and us like trying to like grasp onto control because we don't trust that God is who he says he is. And I think that's exactly what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden. I think that they just purely didn't trust that God was telling them the truth and that he was who he said he was. And so like Exodus, that's the whole thing, right? Like And I think now we're seeing it right now. Like we see that played out in exactly the same way. That's my thought about that.
Yeah, I remember I took that theology of the body course with you and a few of the other people, and I can't really remember a whole ton. So I don't have a good counterpoint for how men would handle information differently compared to women. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else has any points on that.
Dan, you missed such a good question that John asked.
It's the
I
only
want to
one.
share what you were just. Wait, pause. I want to share what Dan was just doing, because I feel like it totally legitimizes everyone in this. Do you care?
Yeah, go for it. You want me to explain it?
Dan just went to go ring the St. Al's church bells so that he could pray for the people who died from coronavirus today.
So
that is so freaking cool.
So every church in the archdiocese is being asked to ring their bells at the 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m. So 5 times a day. And there's a different prayer for a different group of people each day. And then so the one at 9 p.m. is for all those who've died today from coronavirus. And so Kevin and I and the other seminarian who's here with us, Michael, we all take turns ringing the bells and praying the prayer. And so, I mean, you hope that other people know about this. I don't know if they do, but we just want to. It's a way to kind of sanctify the day in a different way, like praying for those.
Sadly, it's not like we don't need to actually ring the bells.
Oh, sad. You don't.
It's not like the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah, when it's heavy enough to lift you up off the ground every time.
Oh, that's disappointing. You should have just like let me think.
No, sorry. Yeah, it's.
We don't
I had
want
to
to
get into
spread
my
any
harness.
fake news here. So.
Speaking of fake news, sorry, did not mean to start that rumor. Dang, that's so awesome.
Yeah, you did.
What, Quasimodo?
Anyways, Dan, you missed like such a good question, because John asked me if I thought that men and women consume media differently.
Oh man.
What do you think about that?
Oh man, Mary Kate and I have we do enjoy talking about the differences between men and women. It might be because she had only sisters, I had only brothers, and we're just like
no, actually, we have a theory about this.
Yeah.
We were literally just talking about this the other day. Yep.
Yeah, like I don't know. Initial thoughts. I'm really not sure. I'm very curious what everyone else thought about that.
I was the only person
media differently.
Spoke.
Give us your thoughts, Dan, as if no one said anything.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, well, I said something.
I know. I just want to rehash it.
I know.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I know one. Well, I guess the first thing I might think of is, so I know women a lot of times with information will kind of process it either relationally or relate it to like a similar feeling as they've like experienced something else, particularly like with relationship. And then with guys, I think it's more of like, I'm thinking totally just out unprocessed thoughts here. Like with guys, it might be just more of like, right, okay, so like what's the point, right? Like the practical, like where's this going? What do I have to do? There's got to be some kind of practical end to this. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think the way that you received that question is an example of a difference between men and women, because I answered that question totally differently than you answered that question. That's my thought about that.
I'm curious what Tim thinks.
Yeah,
I was going to go somewhere along the lines of what Dan said with practicality, that almost like with myself examining like the information that I take in, it's almost like bullets of assets, that I have like these little lines of information that I can pull out of my back pocket and be like, oh, Dan, did you know XYZ? That totally refutes your ABCs. That's why you're wrong, Dan.
Yeah, well, you went to Loyola,
not like
so.
That. Touche. I'll log off now. But a little like, I almost treat it like assets, that I'm reading something.
So that I can gain something from it, right? Like, what is this going to benefit me by reading this thing? Like total sidebar, not media, but like I fall into that trap with like books as well. I read the classics because I'm like, okay, I need to get something out of this, right? I can't just read for fun. I'm going to read something that, will benefit me.
Who reads
some
for
way.
fun? People who read Harry Potter,
That's
obviously.
I don't.
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Read
I'm
another
just
book.
kidding.
Trademark. John.
Zach, okay, actually, we should do a whole episode on Harry Potter sometime. Speaking of conspiracy theories, right, Zach? Anyway, sorry, John. Go ahead.
Shoot. I think Aaron's watching, probably.
I know,
so.
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Aaron, it was a joke. It was a joke.
Oh, man.
John, go
we have
ahead,
one
I'm
less
sorry.
viewer. What happened?
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry, John, go ahead.
I don't know. Are we seriously going to talk about that right now or what?
No, I
No, no,
thought
no,
John had I really don't want to talk
Guys,
about
we actually legit just lost one viewer, so maybe not.
How do we get him back?
Come back.
Oh,
We're
man.
sorry. Wait, John, you guys, John, I seriously thought you were saying something and that I interrupted you. Were
No,
you
that
not
was the
saying
end of it.
anything?
It was essentially that the way I consume
Oh, okay.
like novels is in a way to try and better myself intellectually more than for entertainment purposes.
Yeah, I jive with that too. Same deal.
Hey,
When I'm
Tim.
reading something, I want it to have a practical end. For sure.
That's so interesting.
Hey, Tim. Just like one of the things that when you and I first met, we would talk a lot about all the things that you've read like over the course of your life, and especially during your conversion to Catholicism. Like when you would read a
Sick.
lot of that, and I know it may have been for a specific purpose, but just like I don't know, how would you feel like you kind of process that information or like kind of fed into like your own worldview?
I don't know, because almost like a blank slate kind of thing where I had this worldview and I was, and I mentioned on Slack today where I was going through all these different religions, got into Baha'ism and Zoroastrianism, and a lot of that going
Really?
back to what Mary Kate was saying about like conspiracy theories, like zeitgeist. Like a lot of it, I knew was like, yeah, that's totally bogus. But some of it was like, especially with the whole December 25th, Jesus and the lowest point of the sun. Like, oh my gosh, that's the answer. I was like really
What?
influenced by a lot of that stuff.
Don't
Long
tell me
story.
this stuff. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me.
You never
Oh,
seen
it's easily
Zeitgeist?
refuted. All
No,
you have
I
to
don't
do is
know
read
what
about it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
not.
It's super. I watched that too back in the day during that period, the same thing. And it was like, I'm like, well, what? Hold on a second.
Well, then,
You
Yeah.
read about it, it's like, oh
But-
man, actually none of this is true. It's all bent like, in a crazy
Wait.
way. At least the religion portion.
Yeah.
well, so in exposing yourself to so many religions, Tim, how did you process through like all that
Yeah.
information? I mean, there's totally different viewpoints, I would assume, on a lot of stuff.
So I think going back to to the story that I posted today, the Peter Kreeft bit, where I was driving home from Sears after my shift, and I had a Lighthouse Catholic CD pushed in. It was Peter Kreeft, 7 Reasons to Become Catholic. And within the first couple of minutes, like the first reason is because it's true. That's something I'd never really like considered before. I was kind of under this kind of like shaky impression that Jesus is kind of this mythological figure. Maybe he lived at some point, but there's this stuff added on to him, and but you can never actually know anything about it unless you were there to verify it. But it was like the first time that it was presented that like, no, this is a historical person. He lived. We have verifiable evidence that this is like when he lived, and it's just putting it into a factual kind of basis, like this is, rather than like mushy kind of, so treating facts more as pinpoints rather than as like mushy blotches. That was kind of like a big turn for me, because I would really dwell in the vagueness of religions. Baha'ism is very like that, where it kind of like weaves the best of religions together, and then just kind of like ignores other stuff. It's very appealing that way. It's very easy to mold some of it together. But I think, yeah, in my conversion, when I was reading a lot of these books, looking at Catholic Answers and Word on Fire, the emphasis, like, no, this happened. This is real. So that's kind of like the first time. And I think part of that goes back to my experience in flight school, flying helicopters for the Army, because whenever we fly, we go through emergency procedures. And I remember there's this one time where they're like, what do you do if number 2 fuel low indicator light comes on? I'm like, I think you do this. And they're like, you think? You need to know in an emergency. You don't just get to think, that you can do this. You need to know exactly what you need to push. And that like carried with me a little bit. And then the conversion came and I kind of took that same kind of mindset. So yeah.
Hold on a second. Backtrack, Tim. You were a helicopter pilot in the Army. I had no idea.
Yep.
Tim has like a
I
laundry
was.
list of amazing things that he does.
Tim has the most fascinating life I think
That's
I
dope.
know of.
Sweet.
Yeah. Not
Most
anymore, though.
interesting man
Not
in the world.
anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
Very
Wait,
nice.
okay, but so going back to that's really interesting, because I also think that this question could be looked at within the context of what we're talking about, which is conversion stories. Like, I think that men, like, okay, I would bet, I don't know this, I would bet that the majority of like the YouTube atheists that Bishop Barron talks about, I would bet that the vast majority of them are men. And I don't really understand what it is like if women just have like a more like are more in tune with like a spiritual reality or something. I think maybe there's something to that. But it's interesting to hear you talk about your conversion story, Tim, because I think that men who have come into the faith have come to it by looking at all of their options. And that's like a very male thing. That's a very masculine thing to do, that you're like, I'm going to look at all of the options. And then I'm going to, it's like, okay, this is such a bad example, but like, I feel like men shopping for a car. What's like the best? Well, that's not true. Never mind. Forget that. That's a horrible example,
Let's
because
do
that's
men
not
Shopping
true.
for shoes, Mary Kate.
Okay,
Yeah.
men shoes. Great. Men shopping for shoes.
John shopping for
no,
shoes.
that's not a good example either, actually, because women just want all the shoes. So that's not the right example either. Whatever.
Well,
So,
okay,
I
so
like that.
like the example I'll give on that. So my brother in appliances for his house, right? Like the number of spreadsheets he has
Okay.
for something like that. He like weighs
to
all
analyze
his options.
the practicality of appliances.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
you can't just walk in and buy a washing machine. No, you got to look at every single one. You got to
Yep.
do the math behind how many loads of laundry your family does.
Right.
You know, you crunch all these numbers, and then you wait another few months because that's what you do.
Right.
And then you finally buy the washing machine that your wife told you to buy like
Yeah.
6 months earlier.
Yep.
So
Catholic
Right.
washer. You got the Zoroastrian washer. I mean, there are a lot of options out there, guys.
No, but I think, okay, that's a good example. Like, I think like Tim's whole story is about like seeking the answers and like looking at the entire breadth of information. And like, I think if you talked to like Pri or Jackie or like even myself, my personal, like that moment that I had like an encounter with God or with Christ, that I was like, I love this. This is is going to be the center of my life now, was a very emotional, like, I just love him. Like, I just love him so much. And so I think that speaks to what we're talking about, that like, that's maybe different. And I don't know what that means for information, but I think with the faith aspect, that was the point I was making. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say.
Mary Kate, by the way, so Bishop Barron, the way that he thinks too, like he's a very logical process thinker. I mean, he's Aquinas. Like Aquinas was the reason he got so big into the faith, right? And just like men were very logical, like one step at a time, like process thinkers. And so you throw like Aquinas's 5 ways out there, a lot of guys, you know, who might be questioning their faith will be like, oh, that makes sense. Like that's like that makes it true. And so maybe that's part of the appeal for Bishop Barron.
Much better than Anselm.
Yeah.
You all disagree with that. I'm like, it's not necessarily
I mean,
true.
not yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, no.
You can like Anselm if you want.
Cool. So guys,
Yeah. Well,
what else you want to talk about?
Well, I think it's because I think we are like we bringing it back in like this thing. Because I mean, for me, and I've talked to Dan a lot about this of like it's all for me. It's all I have like all these systems in my mind, and like whenever something comes in, it has to like where does it fit in this? I have to break it down. Where does it fit into all these things? And I mean, that might be a guy thing. It might be just me be my personality type, but that's what I'm constantly doing, whether it's faith or whether it's media or whether it's such and such movie or it's how it all works, and it's this constant like analyzing the truth. And so I think that like why I think that men, it's a good comment of like why men are typically more vocal like online is that like there's something about like truth and opinion that needs to be like defended. And like women are better, I think, just like kind of like sitting at it and being like, yeah, this is what it is. And like, you know, who cares if like, you know, it's, you know, if this other person thinks that it's right or wrong. It's like, but like for me, like truth, like if you are going to offend the truth, man, I am going to come down on you hard. And that's why I'm sure people get annoyed with me on Slack or get offended. Even though I'm like, I want to let this go. Like what you're saying isn't true. And I don't want to let this just sit out there with like people thinking that it's true and like, and use it, even if it's like, now, okay, if it's like an obvious joke, I try to, you know, okay, that's, you know, if it's John, I never correct John because John's always right. And John, and if it's not, it's a joke. But it's this like this affront to truth that I just cannot sit by and watch. Whereas, you know, maybe women, maybe it's like more of like an affront to goodness. Like if, or maybe even beauty. Like if you're attacking like the goodness of something, that's when that's when I think women are gonna be more quick to react as opposed to truth. That's
think
a blanket statement that I have no proof of.
I have a very strong comment about this. I totally agree with you. How do I say this in a way that is not off-putting? I think this is why I have so many friends who are male, because I hate that. And that is so true about women, that women do not want to go there. They are like do not want to go to battle about stuff. And that is obviously not who I am as a person. And, but you're totally right. And I don't think it's coming from a place of like, it doesn't matter, or like women, don't want, like, it's not a priority or something else is a priority. I honestly think it's this, like, I think that some women have like a misplaced compassion, that they're like, I don't want to make people feel bad, or like, I don't want to actually, you know what, I'm going to back up. I think that's true. I also think a lot of women are afraid to defend truth because they're not confident that they actually know. I think that is the more common experience for a lot of women. Like, I think a lot of women are like, I don't know. And I'm content with not knowing. And I don't really, like, I think some women are like, I don't care. Like, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about like other things. I don't know.
Well, and
I shouldn't make jokes about my gender. I was going to make a joke and I'm not going to make it.
Men probably sometimes a little too overconfident, right? And too willing to
oh yeah,
get in there and spar on issues.
Yeah, there's no more hostile place on earth than the comment section of a YouTube video.
Especially the one we currently have, very hostile.
That would be kind of fun if it was a hostile place.
Can't imagine.
Oh, and so what was I going to say about that though?
I don't know.
Men are sometimes.
Sorry.
One of the best things, I don't know if it was Mac or, but somebody said that we should have strong opinions held loosely. And I love that kind of concept, the idea, and it's definitely something that I've kind of tried to incorporate, is that when I learn something and I form an opinion, because I do that very quickly, but I'm always like, if someone presents me with something that'll kind of change my viewpoint, then like I'll change it. So I think that's kind of the antidote for being too overconfident, to like kind of dug in on whatever the issue is, that I think sometimes men have the notion to be that way, is to, don't like have a strong opinion still, because that's something that annoys the crap out of me, is when people just kind of, whatever, it could be either way, you know. No, like, say something.
Well, it still takes humility to admit when you're wrong, but it also takes, like humility. It also works in reverse too. Like, to your last point, to know, I guess, for lack of a better term, have a backbone, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I know, right. We've talked about humility is actually like, it's not being weak and a pushover. It's like just having a right sense of your abilities, your knowledge, like just knowing when you're right, knowing when you're wrong. And that's true humility. So
Can I interrupt this for a second? It might be inappropriate, but I just got to say that, I just went, I just checked the YouTube comments here, and I want to throw out the best comment of the night to Sam Gans for saying that, John, your mom was the one, the one viewer we lost.
Yeah. I had made a mental note of that. That was going to be
Sam.
my.
You win,
That's
in my book at
awesome.
least.
I think unless we get a late comer here, that will.
Well, I mean, Kevin O'Malley's going to drop one comment, and
Yeah, that's true.
I think
Just wait
Kevin
for
must
it.
not be here, which
Well,
is
yeah,
really
Kevin.
offensive.
He's just,
Did he
no,
have
he's
one
just
last
hanging
week?
out. It'll be
Oh,
one.
he did.
It'll be
Kevin
one
O'Malley
comment.
has won the Kevin O'Malley comment of the week both
Twice.
The KOM award,
Wow.
two-time winner.
That's right. That's right. Defending champ.
All right.
You know,
I just
Mary,
I just wanted to put that up on the pedestal.
Tim, what, Tim?
I didn't say anything.
Dan said something.
Did you say my name? Did someone say my name?
yeah, sorry. I
Did Dan
did.
say it?
Hey, Mary
No, it's
Kay.
okay. You're just yelling my name?
Say
I'm
my
just- I don't have anything to say, I'm
name
just saying your
when
name.
no one is
No,
around.
you know-
You say, baby. I'm sorry.
Oh, we need a playlist.
Oh wait, I just thought
Our
of something
intro
that I have
music.
to say. Okay. I have to say this. Dan, don't lose your thing. Don't lose your
It's
thought.
gone.
I made like an intro edit of Dan singing from the last episode, but I haven't done anything with it yet because I don't know if it's any good. But it's
Oh, no.
I personally enjoy
All my
it.
street
I
cred.
personally enjoy it. I don't know if it's worthwhile at all. Anyway, I needed to say that. Dan, go ahead.
Hey, take that to
Say what
prayer,
you're
Mary
gonna
Kate. Oh, anyway, I thought it was really interesting that you said that like a lot of women are just content with not knowing. I was surprised you said that was distinctly a characteristic of women, just because I feel like that's a characteristic of a lot of people, male or female, because
Maybe.
knowledge, a lot of times knowledge, and Tim was saying this so well earlier, like knowledge and understanding truth forces a decision, right? Like the Jesus question, like C.S. Lewis talks about. If you know something, like it has to, if you really believe it in some kind of way, it's going to change the way you think, what you do.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people will avoid objective truth, and relativistic truth is so much more convenient because I don't have to, it doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't mean I
That
have
is
to
so
do anything.
true. Yep. I dated someone for a very long time who went through the whole like I think his family, I think maybe he was baptized and confirmed in the Catholic Church, and then like his family left the church, and then he kind of went through the whole like, what do I believe and whatever. And for the first like year or two that we were dating, he would come to mass with my family and whatever. And then like in college, all of a sudden out of nowhere, he was like, I'm an atheist, and like obsessed with like all the stuff on YouTube. Like he was like that YouTube atheist that Bishop Barron talks about. I think maybe still is. I honestly don't know now, but it is like what you're saying. I guess the reason I'm providing that context, Dan, is like what you're saying. That was another when we were talking about the conversion stories, and David had mentioned something to do with a relationship. I thought of this moment that I was in a Catholic bookstore in college, and I had been dating this guy on and off for like 3 or 4 years at this point. And I was like standing in this bookstore, and I had just come out of daily mass, and like this guy and I had so many conversations about like faith and like whether or not we'd be married in the church and like birth control and all these things. And I was like so deeply convicted on like, I wanted to be married in the church, and I wanted to raise kids in the church, and I didn't want to use artificial hormonal birth control and all these other things. And he wasn't really convicted for anything. He just didn't want to do what I wanted to do, basically. Good guy, as you can maybe guess. So I'm standing in this Catholic bookstore, and I'm like looking at books, and I remember like looking at this like marriage book, this like Catholic marriage book, and having this like series of thoughts in my head about like, if I pick up a book like that, it's going to force me to make decisions about all of these things going on in my life that I don't want to make a decision about. Like if I go there with God, and I remember like, I think I was conversing with God about this, in my head, like if I go there, I'm going to have to make some decisions that I inevitably like will like won't be happy with, or like I thought like will be hard decisions. So I would rather just not make the decision, or just like not have the book or whatever. And so like I walked out and, you know, actively chose in that moment, like not to engage that like opportunity to like dive a little deeper about like, what is marriage and how should I, you know, like what should I be thinking about when I'm like pursuing a relationship with someone and some of these other things. And I think like I look back now on that whole experience, and it took years for me to like get through that. And I think that had I just like acknowledged what the truth was when it was presented to me in the very beginning, like I think that it would have been a much different experience for me. But we like, you know, like Dan, what you're saying, I think we avoid acknowledging, you know, we don't want to enter into truth because truth demands something of us. Like it asks us to make or to be convicted or to make a decision. And it's easier to just push that away than it is to say like, if this is true, if Christ is real, and if he is who he says he is, again, like if he is who he says he is, this means something for every single element of my life. So that's my thing.
And Mary Kate, as I've expressed before too, that's my problem with pornography, is that like real relationships with people, it requires something of you. And with pornography, men are flocking to that because there's nothing required. It's you're trying to get the pleasure out of what is a beautiful thing at no cost to you. And it's not, and therefore it's not real love. Like it's not real. And so just like knowledge, and I think Kevin was actually talking about this a couple of days ago, or maybe yesterday, just like the more that you know something, the more you can love it. And that's, and just like in this regard, I mean, it's very, very true.
Yep.
Also,
To know is to love.
There's also great moments where truth itself, Jesus Christ, you know, something hits you, something that you read years ago, and then all of a sudden it hits you all at once. And one of the ones that constantly comes back to me is, you know, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It's one of the things you read and you're like, yeah, okay, he's being hyperbolistic, okay, whatever. Then all of a sudden you realize like, oh man, like I might have to really give up this thing, and like, oh, Jesus comes right from Jesus too, like, oh, and you have those moments, and it forces a decision.
Yep, exactly. Amen.
Boom.
So, did we cover all?
Is this where we go to our fan mail?
Oh, maybe.
AKA our comment section.
We don't have a ton. I'm a little sad. The comments are not nearly the quantity. It's because David Allen's not here.
Exactly.
Where is he doing?
There's one person that is missing from these comments. And that's David Allen.
And it's David.
Yeah,
I can't see the comments
on the
YouTube.
On the YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't see him? Are you logged in?
Yeah.
Oh.
Were you able to see them in the past?
Yeah, the previous weeks I can see him. I can't see him this week.
Oh.
Whoa.
That's sad.
Well, no real questions asked.
Wow, will this be our shortest stream ever?
We can't allow that.
Still an hour and a half.
We can't allow that. There's still more we could talk about with regards to the topics that Kevin threw out there, I think.
Okay, so I mean, it's far. Going back, I think this is probably maybe a whole month ago. Mary Kate, you threw something out there on Slack about you know, pop culture and what we're taking in terms of like secular culture and secular things, and you know, the chat on there was, you know, should we even be doing that? Should we be kind of curating things to be like, we should only be doing stuff that's that we see as true or as like bettering faith? And I know personally, like there's a lot of like secular stuff that I watch that I think that I really enjoy, and I've you know, taken a lot from, and me and Dan just finished a rewatch of Band of Brothers,
Yes.
which is just an awesome show, miniseries about World War II. If you never heard of it, and I don't know, there's certainly nothing like explicitly Christian or Catholic about it, and it wasn't necessarily made for that. But like I'm just sitting there, like pulling out some things, even like kind of lamely comparing like these guys sitting in their foxholes with me and Dan and the other seminarian Mike. We're sitting here on our couch, during this time of quarantine, and like obviously there's like there's not shells raining down upon our heads, but there is something about something about this situation that it has this like that war does. Like it's an awful thing, but it bonds these guys together for life. And then this kind of like a band of brothers. I just kind of like, that's what I was thinking about, that specific thing, but just in general everywhere, how we're taking pop culture in, is it always with a, some sort of ulterior motive of like, what does this mean for faith and stuff like that. So I'll throw that out there.
I mean, I think we have to kind of consider it in certain respects, right? Like not for the good of our soul, right? So like me personally, I had to make the decision for myself that I wasn't going to watch Game of Thrones, right? Because of all the nudity and stuff.
Yeah.
And
even though you are Jon Snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm working on it again. So
yeah.
like,
when John first moved to Chicago, he had like long, like shoulder length hair and a just beautiful beard. It's a beard he has now, actually.
Yeah,
He
His
looks,
beautiful
in my opinion,
beard.
exactly like Jon Snow. Just
I am a big fan of the long hair, John. You got to bring it back.
so
Yeah, it's pretty long right now.
it's getting there. It's getting there. The quarantine's helping,
Nice.
But yeah, so I had to make that decision for myself, and it was a good one for my spiritual life and my soul.
Yep.
And did I miss out on some water cooler conversations? Sure, but what does that matter, right?
it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, well,
Makes you feel better.
I didn't feel like I was, honestly, towards the end, like I didn't feel like I was missing anything. So that's one of the most preeminent example of something like that for me personally.
Right.
I have a story. Dan and Kevin both know this seminarian. When I was living at the House of Discernment, he was learning Spanish, and he asked me for my DVDs. I have a whole bunch of movies, and I have this whole case of DVDs. Like, yeah, absolutely. He gave it to him. After a while, he gives it back to me, and he's like, man, I went ahead and I took the liberty of throwing out some of your movies. You have some really unwholesome movies, and I just for your benefit, I went ahead and threw some of them away. I was like, what are you doing, man? And it's like stuff like Eurotrip. Like, he threw away my copy of Eurotrip. But it's like, after a while, I'm like, shoot, he really has a point, doesn't he? Like, Eurotrip has zero redemptive value, and it doesn't.
I respect that so much.
That's the issue I'm constantly struggling with, and yeah. So
so
yeah, the big thing with women.
Dubstep.
Mary Kate.
Oh, she's gone.
No.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
He's gone, guys. It's clear.
It means my family, so I'm using the Wi-Fi. That's
Oh.
Somebody's watching Eurotrip downstairs.
Yeah. Tom actually kept it.
Oh,
Shoot, I just gave it away. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. Hey, so oh man, I'm the worst.
He's not watching this, don't worry.
That's good. Yeah. Dude,
he's in the chapel right now.
He's in the chapel, and he's a better man for it.
Yeah.
Trainer, it took me 5 seasons to figure that out about Game of Thrones. I was so hooked, man. And I don't watch TV shows, so when I buy into a TV show, I'm all in, man. I was so into it. And the Game of Thrones story, the plot is a grade A. I mean, A+. without question. And that's the only reason I kept holding on to it. I remember I was talking to like my parents actually were watching it, and they stopped after like season 3. They're like, this is just like this is just not okay. It's not okay. And I'm like, come on, just like get over it. It's fine. The plot. It's all about the plot, right? Because that's the most important thing. And no, just like at the end of season 5, I'm like, no, this is just not. It's not okay. And Kevin and I just had a class the other day where this incredible woman was talking to us about ministering to women, and I forget exactly how it came up, Kevin, but she mentioned that there's a really popular show out there that is just like absolute toxic to the soul. She was talking about Game of Thrones, and she named it, and just like it's straight up pornography. Like, let's not mince words. Straight up porn.
The question, I think.
Yeah, and like it's. I think what? All right. Anyway, so she
Never mind.
I don't know what you're saying. But she was saying just like, you know, it's straight up pornography, and I was like, it is, and it has she's gone. And it's like it's very easy to disguise. Really, it's easy to like disguise just stuff that's not good for us with like really good plot or really good acting or really good whatever. And like I've used that as an excuse to myself for like watching that kind of stuff, and that's just, you know.
Was it a for Game of Thrones, Dan? Was it a tipping point in terms of like this episode was really bad, or was it a slow, like what led you to throwing in the towel?
Yeah, that's funny. Another big factor was also the futility of it. So one of my major favorite characters that I was really holding on to as everybody else was getting slaughtered died. And I was frustrated about it, but it just like kind of made me think twice about the whole show. I'm just like, I'm taking the bait. I'm taking it hook, line, and sinker on just like getting fed in and then getting let down. And at the same time, and then that would just, I don't remember exactly how, but then that would just bring me back to like, what else about this show is not good? And then I'm like, oh, there's like a legitimate moral problem with this show too. So
it's really easy to justify it too once you get hooked on something like that too. Because I went through I did the whole Breaking Bad, series, and there are a few other shows I got sucked into that, especially now that Netflix is a thing, you just binge watch in general. But yeah, and then there's always somebody, you talk about filtering content on the internet. There's always somebody who's got the they make a list of like 10 reasons why Game of Thrones is a Catholic show or something. Somebody always finds some way to bridge that nonsense into whatever you're, trying to fight against. But
that person needs Jesus. Can you guys hear me? You're working.
I hear you now.
You're better now. Yeah.
Okay. So what's her name? The girl in that show, Dan, in Game of Thrones. What's her name?
There's several.
There's several girls in the show.
Daenerys Targaryen, right?
Daenerys.
So, what's her real name though?
One of them, I don't know her real name, but one of them, like just a year or two ago, said that she has PTSD from filming some of those sex scenes.
I think that's the one who named who played Daenerys. I can't remember her name.
It's from season 1. The scene she's talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a specific scene. Wow.
When
Emilia Clarke.
Yeah.
There it is.
When
There it is.
Drogo is
Jason Momoa.
consummating the marriage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did like an interview, I think it was a year or so ago, that she said like, I have legit problems because of that scene. Are you losing me now? You guys hear
You're
me?
good.
Oh, okay.
you're just lagging.
And partway through the series, because she was doing nude scenes for the first couple of seasons, then she stopped. She's like, no, I can't do this anymore. This is too
Right.
much. Yeah.
It is so like, as a woman, I just can't buy this whole, like, it is just so unnatural to like, it just goes against our nature to like take your clothes off in front of a room full of people. Like, that is so, you are breaking every natural inclination that. Can you guys hear me?
Your face was just frozen on the TV and like a.
I'll just send you a screenshot because it's frozen in his. It
was pretty great.
It's hilarious.
No, I don't.
I was
don't
looking for my
understand.
phone. I'm like, oh gosh.
Goes everything against I believe.
Oh.
Oh,
Hey,
it's
Speaking of
such
bad
a serious
content.
topic too. That's,
Sorry,
oh.
yeah, I know. It's
No,
getting
but that's who we are. We can't hide it.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I really roasted Kevin hard for 2 weeks after his, so I deserve it. It's okay. Anyways, I don't remember what I was saying, but yeah.
Emilia Clarke, PTSD.
Yeah. Well, oh, the other thing I was gonna say, last year for Lent, one of the things that I did was I gave up like all secular medias of all kinds. Like I didn't do any, like no movies, no TV shows, no secular music. I pretty much like was trying to like invoke silence in my life as much as possible. And so I noticed afterward, like trying to go back to that, like watching TV or movies or anything, it made me so hypersensitive. Like things that never would have bothered me, songs I used to listen to regularly or like, you know, whatever. It made me feel like I am listening to, like, it literally like made the hairs on my arms stand up. Like it just like bothered me so much. And so it's something that has kind of carried into like my normal life now. Like there are just things I refuse to watch. I think The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, I started to mention that before when I was like, not when you guys couldn't hear me, but like, oh my gosh, did you guys just send this picture to the, no.
It's just us. Don't worry. It's not going anywhere.
Bad.
Well, now she reveals
Yeah, now it's
everything.
everywhere. Oh.
Oh boy.
Well,
That
okay,
is
so
so bad.
to interact with it, so Derek is asking like, so what are like we're like bashing on. There's a lot of shows out there that are trash, and
Yeah.
even if they're good. So like, what is out there? Like, I mean, I'm not out there. I will put a plug in right now. If you're not watching The Chosen right now, you should be. Really good. It's
not familiar at all.
It's made by VidAngel. It's about it's about the gospel. It's about Jesus and specifically him calling the disciples, and it's just really, really well done. But as far as like secular media, I mean, you know, what are we okay watching? I mean, I've despite the fact that like, you know, that sometimes they like talk about, you know, hooking up or there's that. Like, I mean, I love Parks and Rec. I love The Office. I love Arrested Development. Like these are shows that I like. Yeah. I watch and I can't bring myself to. Maybe there's something out there that like eventually I'll realize these are all wrong and I shouldn't be watching them. But those are the ones that I don't really feel like this, like, that I'm doing something wrong by watching them. That are, you know, I'm not just watching VeggieTales all day. You know, as great as VeggieTales is.
I have an example of a show that I actually really love a lot. Well, there are a few that I think are really good and like wholesome, but one in particular that I think is like an unexpected show that I love is it's called I Am a Killer on Netflix. Have you guys heard of this? I'm really into biographies. Like I really like to know people's stories and like get in people's minds. And this show, I Am a Killer, it is so heartbreaking, but it teaches you so much about the human person and like relationships and like how important it is for people to have like a stable family life and what?
Just keep going. Don't read the comments.
It's so distracting.
Then hide the chat.
Don't look at John.
So anyway, I can see you all giggling, and I'm like, I know they're talking about me somewhere. I just
Tim,
don't know where
quit
they're
giggling,
talking about
man.
me. Dan, you're the worst of them all.
I know. I'm sorry.
I wish you guys could be next to Dan when he's making a meme. No one laughs at him at his own memes. Like no one laughs like he does. Like some that are really funny. But
half the time, that's what makes me start laughing is looking at Dan giggling.
oh my gosh,
I'm sorry.
It's one of my favorite things. He just starts like, and it's just like giggle. It's not as, it's just like, it's so good.
Oh.
Anyway,
Get it under control.
I'm sorry.
And this is why we want
Turn my
Dan
camera.
unmuted so his laugh can be
Oh.
infectious to the entire.
Yeah, it's so unfair. It's so unfair when Dan's cracking up and he's muted and no one knows.
Like if I was the reason I mute myself is because, as Kevin knows, I process thoughts out loud, and so I just say some weird stuff out loud sometimes. I'm just like, no, that's not what I want. And like, someone's in the middle of some like, great, talk or whatever. And I'm like,
That's the kind of content we're looking for.
That's
interesting.
People want quality content.
Jackie just said, Dan, you have to say my name out loud.
Who's Jackie? I only know Chuck Quay.
Oh shoot.
I mean,
That's bad.
I mean, it was like unironically or like seriously, that's how he pronounced it for real. I'm like, dude, it's like it's
Right.
not.
Do you not know anyone that's had that name before?
It just.
Wait, but hold on a second, because I just went back to YouTube here, and Mary Kate, you're like commenting back and forth with people the whole time, so
Yeah.
you're not focused either.
Ooh.
Did you just call me out?
Oh.
Yeah, I did.
Whoa.
I did.
Whoa.
Have a little
Yeah.
side chit
Yeah, but
chats with all these girls.
Here's the
and-
difference. Here's the difference. When something funny happens that's not part of the conversation, I don't visibly laugh.
Yeah, you do.
Uh,
Yeah, you do.
I know. It's
All
fine.
right,
I don't care.
Dan,
I'm
you
just
have
giving you guys a hard time.
you have a challenge in the chat there, Dan. If you want to
right.
look at the YouTube chat,
All right.
there's a challenge there for you.
Oh, hey, she says don't let them bully you. So Marie, I am not going to say your last name because I'm not going to let them bully me.
No, I'm pretty sure Marie's talking to me.
No, she's definitely talking to me.
No, it's a
You said
Dan
it.
name pronunciation challenge.
No. Marie,
Yeah.
tell them that you were talking to me. She said it earlier. She said,
Zach.
she said, "Don't bully you." Wednesday." Get that out of here. Get that. Get that out of here.
This is my favorite thing in a long time. The nice thing about a cell phone is you can expand
Yeah.
it.
Hey, send that to me. That's
Zach.
becoming a meme. You send that to me, Zach.
It's already sent to you, right?
It's in your text message.
I knew.
Yeah.
I knew Dan was gonna do that.
I will make a meme of that if you send it to
It
me.
won't go away. I got you,
Oh.
Dan.
That
Don't
is-
worry.
So
Thanks,
bad.
man.
Talking about media, and you mentioned it with "I Am a Killer" or whatever. What is it with women and true crime? That seems to be a
Ooh.
what's that?
I mean,
What's
I
that?
love true crime.
I don't. I
Like Serial to make it murder. I mean, Tiger King,
Kevin's
of
offended.
course. Carol
How
Baskin
dare you
absolutely killed her
generalize the
husband.
audience of true crime like that, John?
I'm not the
Mostly
first. I'm not the first to have done so.
I don't have any interest in true crime, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Fair enough. Well, is
but,
"I Am a Killer"? That's not true crime. That sounded like it.
All right, done.
Okay, you guys stop it with the picture. I
Sorry.
can't. It's so
Sorry.
bad. It's literally so bad. Why did you zoom in on my eye?
It's funny.
Because it's funny. Okay. Anyways, wait, John, what did you ask? You asked about true crime.
Well, apparently it's not true, but I was under the impression that women specifically love true crime.
I think a lot of women like I don't know. I don't know what true crime is, so I can't speak to that.
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Well, like cold cases and like I mean,
What?
you listen to Mary Kate, do you listen to Serial? The podcast Serial?
Me?
Yeah.
I haven't listened to Serial.
Yeah.
I've heard it's good. I haven't listened
It's
to
so
it.
good, but it's yeah. That's all. I mean, it's that's like John's like talking about true crime. Anyway, this is
Yeah.
going good places
yeah.
right now.
Yeah, this is
It is going
High
weird places.
quality content.
Interest in true crime. Marie says she has lots of interest in true crime.
All right. Well.
Sam Gans is trying to get a rise out of me.
Uh-oh.
Sam Gans.
What's he saying? Because I don't have access to the comments.
Nancy
see you,
Grace
Sam.
the goat.
He's trolling me.
So Sam Gans is taking the yeoman's work from David Ellett this week. So thank you, Sam. Appreciate that.
Yeoman's work. Yeah, Sam
Nancy
Gans
Grace
won
the goat.
the
What is Sam talking about?
Kevin O'Malley word of the week for sure.
Yeah, he's really stepping up for filling 2 pairs of shoes.
Right, I know, and for this, we are proud.
And this is, I mean, on the heels of him laying
Sean,
down the
with-
law on Slack.
Sean,
I mean,
Ooh,
he's
Yeah.
really, he is making his presence physically felt in the city of Chicago, perhaps the world.
particularly in the online. He's
Yeah.
more online than I've ever seen him.
Very online. Very online. Nice job, Sam.
Perhaps that's because he's bored during this quarantine,
And
Well,
especially if he's watching us at 10 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
People from
That was-
Ohio. People
there
from Ohio
are
can do
14 viewers. We have
good
14
things.
viewers.
Oh, 14, man.
Don't
14
let
I
the
mean,
fact that
Got
they're
your
from
how many-
moms
Ohio-
back on.
One of them is me. One of them is
Yeah,
me.
yeah. How many of them are us? So
Mine is 6, so that's 8.
Oh boy.
Dan, you should say that out loud and see if you're
You know
correct.
what?
you
I
can
liked
say
when
that
we
out
could
loud.
have a private chat and it didn't have to get brought out to the public, man. I like that
I just
better.
saw that. I don't know why I didn't see it.
You know,
Oh.
I just want to make my
I
jokes
saw it. I saw
among
it.
the
in
6
real
of us,
time.
Hey,
and I just want them to
if we're
stay.
if we're
here,
gonna
man.
if we're gonna roast Mary Kate so bad, we gotta send it around equally, you know?
I'm just here to entertain everybody.
Yeah, entertain the people.
Brought to you by Sparkosoft.
Next week, our sponsor will come back.
Soft
We are not
Actually-
getting paid for this video. We are not getting paid for
That's
this
right.
video,
That's
unfortunately.
right.
We should be getting
Except
paid
the,
to do
the
this.
first
Should
hour.
be.
I should
first
be getting
hour
paid
was-
to do this. Or like, actually, you guys. So I
Yes.
Zach, you didn't. You
Dude.
didn't, Zach. You didn't.
What?
You didn't. You didn't. Did you post that picture in Slack?
Wait.
It's like the fourth
Oh.
time I've used
Did
Slack.
you?
It's like the fourth time I've ever
Oh
used it.
my gosh. That should. You guys have been posting this in Slack.
I didn't know this thing.
No,
I mean-
Kevin didn't.
Oh, this is
I have-
our. Sorry, this is our group. I'm sorry.
I do have the source file though.
Apparently, I'm a boomer. I was looking at our group text message and I thought it was Slack.
Oh, it's in
Wow.
Slack too.
I'm on the
Yeah, I see
Slack.
that.
Okay. Hey, can I give a shout out
anyway.
to someone in our viewer list?
Yeah, please do.
We do this like inside the NBA. We can give shout outs to people who are watching. All right. Marie, I just want to give you a shout out, and I am going to take the risk of pronouncing your last name. And I think it is pronounced Athady. Am I right?
We all wait.
As in.
I hope I'm not the only one here who actually like.
I think it's Ataid.
I need you to. Yeah. All right. Let's see if that comes out.
So the
the
the guess is Athady.
Athady.
Athady. Okay.
As in.
Is it?
Never mind.
No,
No,
yeah.
never mind. Kevin is just absolutely dying right now.
This is a funny joke. Say it out loud.
All right, so I said, is it pronounced Athady, as in I own a Mercedes Benz?
Ataid.
You didn't.
He's gonna
You're
hate me
right.
forever, man.
This
We
is
just
so
became
stupid.
friends.
I don't know.
We still don't know if it's right or not.
Nope. We
This is
are
why I go on Mike, Mary Kate. Or I go on mute.
on mute.
You typed that into the
Yeah, I know. Silent humor is the best.
That was
That's why I love memes.
that was far more willful than just spewing it while you were muted.
All right.
All right.
Okay, what are we doing now?
Okay.
So
Media wrapped.
this has been pretty comprehensive on media, I must say.
So if you could
you did
recommend
kinda
one
we did a good
show,
job.
If you recommend one show, TV to watch, what would it be?
Ooh,
Call
that's
the
a
midwife.
awesome
Oh,
question.
midwife. You know, I want to go something
Call the midwife.
Natural and educational. I would say Planet Earth. Planet Earth 2, even.
Ooh.
Beautiful cinematography.
Planet Earth
any of
2, Electric
What?
Boogaloo.
What?
What?
Did you just rhyme that on purpose?
That's all the internet.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, don't give me any credit for any of jokes I ever say because I always just plagiarize them. But there's a movie in the late 80s that its subheading was Electric, it's
Something
whatever
to
two,
Electric Boogaloo, yeah.
Electric Boogaloo. So now Planet Earth 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Planet Earth 2, Electric Boogaloo. What you gonna do? Kevin,
This is
go
just
for
like
you.
riveting content, you guys. This is
Yeah.
so
Okay,
interesting.
so the
Marie wants
so-
Dan to keep trying.
Once I start rhyming, I can't stop.
I
She's
say
also
we-
dying.
Oh, well, if she's dying, then you really have
Oh
to,
man.
have to keep going.
so Zach says Planet Earth. Mary
Two.
Kate said
Call the midwife.
Call the Midwife, which I've never heard of.
Actually, I Am a Killer. I changed my mind. I Am a Killer.
All right, go watch, and that's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
All right. Who's next? Dan.
Favorite show?
No, show not your favorite show necessarily. What's a show
Do
like?
you see what Marie just put in the chat?
you
No, I'm
recommend?
trying to answer Kevin's question.
Marie said, no, my joke actually is step aside. Step aside.
Like Mike Tyson. Step aside, you guys.
That's
Now key it.
awesome.
Kevin, what was the
Now
question
make
again?
them key it.
I'm sorry,
Question
Kevin,
is-
go ahead. What was
The
the
question is, what show would you, if someone says, give me a show to watch, what show are you telling them to watch?
Man,
It can be Tiger King if you want.
I don't watch a lot of TV, so I got to think about it. I think, okay, this isn't, are we talking like a drama or something like that?
It can
Or
be
like
whatever. It can be.
okay, inside the
I'm
NBA.
saying-
Anything.
Inside the NBA, because it's so funny. Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet Smith and Shaq are just one of the best comedy groups out there. They're so funny. I don't even really
One
care
of the
that much
best
about
comedy.
NBA basketball.
Who knew?
I don't really care that much. It's so funny.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so sticking with that theme, the greatest thing on TV right now is The Last Dance.
It is true.
It's
There it is.
The Last
I was
Dance.
wait. That question was just for me
did
to.
not expect you.
I
I
was
did
just
not
setting up- I was
expect you
just
to say
setting it up.
that, John.
It was just setting. My question was to set up John. You're welcome, bud. And you
Okay.
liked it. Just absolutely destroyed it.
so phenomenal. Tune in next Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Time.
For 2 hours.
You get 2 episodes out of it. Dennis Rodman's episode 3. I don't know what episode 4 is. If you want a little backstory on Dennis Rodman between now and then, watch the Bad Boys 90s
Yes.
Pistons documentary. It's a 30 for 30. Watch that first. It's a great time for basketball. Who would have thought in the midst of all this right now is a great time for basketball.
Even though it's not being played.
I mean, can I drop a conspiracy theory?
Always.
Oh no.
That the people who
He created the peace treaty between North Korea and the United States.
Hey, we're short on hot takes tonight, so let's hear it. Okay.
Okay, this is my take. Wait, what's the name of this documentary again? Tell me the name of this documentary so I don't botch it.
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance. Okay, so my theory is that the people who created The Last Dance released coronavirus into the world so that there would be no sports and everyone in the world would be watching The Last Dance.
Ooh, I can get behind this one. I like this.
Wow.
I can get behind
Now
this.
we're all dead.
That's my
Goodbye.
theory.
Thank you.
Wow. You said the same thing for Tiger King.
What?
Like, there's no way Tiger King would have been as popular as it was.
Well,
if it didn't
that
come
is
out.
100% true. The Last Dance is still quality.
No, it's absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's high quality. But oh man, Mary Kate.
Sam Gans, Last Dance is life changing. No, it's not. Don't use your words so loosely.
All right. So
getting called out.
John says recommending The Last Dance. Tim, what are we recommending?
So I really like Ken Burns. He's like one of the best documentarians that's like ever existed. And he just came
Sick.
out with a new documentary called The Gene. and there's a lot of different components to it. They dive into like the Huntington's disease and like so the gene, or really any documentary by Ken Burns.
I got to meet him when I was at Illinois State. Pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Big fan of documentaries.
Yeah.
Oh, a fictional, a historical fiction show that was really, really good. It was I, Claudius. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that.
I don't know.
One of my roommates recommended it just recently.
Yeah,
actually,
it's really good acting. It was like a BBC thing from, I don't know, maybe like the 70s or 80s or something like that. It's a the whole pretense is that Claudius, like Emperor Claudius of Rome, wrote about all the drama that was going on in his family and then hid the records, and then it's been like discovered. And so it's all told from his perspective of just how insane the imperial family is in Rome. It's very cool. And like there's a lot of allusions to like, oh, like this guy named Jesus was just around like in our outpost in like Galilee. Like, so like it's very well done and well acted. There's a bunch of people in there too.
Cool.
That's interesting.
Anyway, yeah.
Claudius.
I, Claudius. Like it's his testimony.
Claudius. So Kevin, have we heard yours?
Yeah, mine's there's a show called Game of Thrones that like
Oh,
Good.
man.
I
Very good.
think because like there's kind of like the ones that like I think everyone in this world should watch Parks and Recreation. So that seems kind of a okay. I would say if you have
I love that show.
If you have not seen The Good Place, I would say I recommend The Good Place because
Good Place, definitely.
Because not only is it's really funny and it's very, very like clever humor and it's well acted. Kristen Bell is great and Ted Danson and all the characters. It's really well done. But it also gives like this fascinating look into like the views on morality, and it teaches morality. But it's also like the view. It's this fascinating view of like the afterlife, and it's like, the whole thing is like you either go to the good place or you go to the bad place.
Well, it's very Pelagian. Sounds like.
Well, not really. Yeah. But it is. It's like you get like credits for like it's a point total thing, and the whole thing is that Kristen Bell's character is in the good place, which he's not supposed to be.
Don't.
That's the
okay. All right.
First episode, John.
Okay. All right.
I'm not gonna give anything else away, but like it's just like, and then so like it's she's like, okay, I'm in the good place, and so like and you see what the good place is, but it's like this very empty, like it's what when people like think of heaven, it's what they think of when they think of heaven. Like there's I can constantly have like every need catered to and all this stuff, and it's just like as it goes on, it's kind of this very clever commentary of like what heaven actually is. And so I would recommend it's a show that I don't think you have to feel guilty watching. There's really not any like the hookup stuff really isn't there. I mean they can't swear because they're in heaven, because they're in the good place, and so like they literally she says like bullshit and holy fork. I mean it's like it's really really well done. Yeah, and she can't swear, so
it's good stuff.
Yeah, that's nice. The show that I would recommend.
I like it.
And it's also like redeeming and uplifting as well. Yeah, there's a couple points where they're like talking about lesbianism and stuff, like okay, sure. Whatever. But like, yeah, it's like mostly there in like the redemptive qualities. So, yeah.
I feel like that. I feel like what is heaven really like is touching on one of like the greatest human desires and greatest human questions out there, right?
Yeah.
And like we don't really have a whole lot to work with in that regard too, right? So I think it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that Dan thinks that's cool.
Cool, bro.
Cool.
All right. Do you guys have any last minute thoughts? I do. I will share something with you all. I ordered a bunch of candles the other day that smell like chrism, and I'm burning them in my room right now, and it smells like
nice. Nice.
Speaking of chrism, I got some beer balm that's chrism. Yeah. So.
Beard. I thought you said beer bomb.
That too. Why not?
I mean, as long as we're on product placement here, had a little glass of Jethro Tea Boots, which I've never heard of before. Somebody must have left it here at a party, but
Ew.
dang, is it good whiskey.
Jethro
Alright.
Tea Boots.
Yeah, I started off with a
Boots.
expensive bottle of Woodford Reserve and ended up at Jethro Tea
Hey.
Boots. And Jethro, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah. That's,
Would you
what's
actually
going on over
recommend
here.
me got? Should I get in a bottle?
what's that?
Should I get a bottle of Jethro Tea?
Yeah, give it a shot.
Okay.
Pretty tasty.
Jethro Tea Boots.
Jethro Tea.
I might name the
Oh, there he
episode
is.
that.
There is Jethro. All right.
Sounds like a name on a fake ID or something.
Yeah.
John or Dan, you'd never have a fake ID.
Jethro Titus
Does anyone have
Boots.
fake
I
IDs?
said it sounds like
prior to being 21?
it sounds like it was on one.
I never did.
No,
You
I
didn't,
never
Kevin?
did.
No.
We
Are
just
you
knew
guys
where to go
serious?
where you could get in without
I
getting.
just it was too expensive to drink in bars, so we would have house parties and I could drink. People would buy stuff for free, and so
Once we're 21, of course.
Apple
we all
juice,
waited-
we all
cranberry
waited
juice,
until we were 21. to
soda,
drink, so.
yeah,
kitty cocktails.
uh-huh.
I still
That's
hot
drink
chocolate in the winter.
Oh,
Yep.
always a staple. Always a staple.
Hmm
College, man.
Yeah, I can drink apple juice really fast.
I once shotgunned a juicy juice box.
Seriously, that's awesome.
I was just gonna say, I don't think he's kidding. I think he did that. You really never did that?
I mean,
Well, now he has weekend plans, so.
I
that's
mean,
good.
what? I mean,
That's
honestly,
true.
when you were a kid, I definitely shotgunned I definitely shotgunned a Capri Sun.
I was gonna say, man, Capri Sun. Yeah, those things. You just.
I didn't know it was called
It's done.
shotgunning, but you just bit into the side and just squeeze it. Boom.
You
No.
bit into the side of a Capri
Well, how else will
Sun.
you? I mean, otherwise you have this little hole.
That's
It's
true.
not optimal hydration out of that small opening.
Yeah, you need to quench your thirst. And if that Silver Surfer looking dude,
It's got what kids want.
right? Exactly.
It's got electrolytes.
Electrolytes.
Gotta let yes.
Yes.
Why? I don't understand why that was
Got
so
what kids
funny.
want, man.
There's a movie.
Wait,
there's a movie
really?
called-
Oh,
There's a movie called Idiocracy that's about it's got electrolytes. It's got what pamphlet. It's basically like people in the future, like because the people who are like who
I'm stupid.
produce more
Yes.
kids are dumb, and so like planet Earth, like the population becomes gradually stupider, and it's all about that. It's
So they start watering their crops with essentially
like
Gatorade. And the reason why is because it has what plants crave.
You know,
It has
like
electrolytes.
Like you want to use water,
This is
like
so
out the toilet?
ridiculous.
From the toilet?
like from the
This is
toilet?
going. Hey, speaking of toilet, that's where this conversation's going, man. Okay, you
Oh,
gotta,
there
you
it
gotta
is.
steer us back. Steer us back, man.
Can
right.
can Dan be
On
our
that note-
like designated segue guy? Because I feel like
That was very good.
yeah, right?
Dan,
Speaking of,
let's keep this conversation moving. I don't think Dan can be trusted to have a particular task other than perhaps meme making.
That's
He's
an
very
important
good at it.
task.
I also am very
Very
good at the side chat at talking about people while someone else
While
is
they're
talking.
speaking.
Kevin knows I do that in seminary very well.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's actually been kind of fascinating. So like we have our classes online now, and there's it's much like you're on Zoom, like we use Microsoft Teams, but there's what's going on like on the screens, and then there's like a side chat thing that we're making like side comments, and sometimes you forget that the teachers can read all those too. Not that we say anything bad about them, but like it's just like this stupid stuff that like I'll like
Say
whisper
dumb
to
stuff.
Dan or like a classmate, like people who sit next to me, like I'll just like make these little like side comment, and now everyone gets to experience the
I actually think these like side comment chats are kind of horrifying because like you can message people privately, but then you don't know if you're like responding to them privately or like I could see myself sending something to someone
yeah.
in this and thinking it's totally private and then it's actually going to everyone. That would happen to me.
I wouldn't put
Can't
a
take
whole
it
lot of
back.
faith. Yeah,
You
I
can't
wouldn't
take
put
it
a whole
back.
lot
Like
of
there's
stock
no
in
way to
the
delete it.
privacy of Zoom. I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in that.
Kind of horrifying actually.
Yeah.
They're already saying these things were getting
Cool.
hacked pretty regularly.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure somebody's hacking this because there's a lot of sensitive information.
Well, they just want all our viewers, you know.
Right. Yeah.
All right, you guys, I think we should call it. Is there
All right.
anything anyone would like to add? What should
Are we-
I name this episode when I upload the audio?
Mercedes Benz.
Yeah. I think you have to name it that.
That's absolutely
Hey.
what I'm gonna name it.
Hey, Marie,
Danny,
if you're still listening, Marie, do I get one more chance?
She said
I
you
wanted
wanted
you to
told you how
guess.
I think you
Okay.
get as many
I told you
chances
how
as
to
you
pronounce
want.
She already
it.
said-
Try
she said
again.
how to do it.
Wait, she did?
She said it's a
Yeah,
thigh.
she did.
Yeah, 'cause
Remember?
she's like her joke is
Stepified?
step.
Oh,
Come on now.
oh, look at that.
All right, so
we
Oh,
can
man.
officially rule the Kevin O'Malley Award of the week goes to Sam
Sam
Gans.
Sam Gies.
Nice
Well done,
job.
Sam.
Congrats, Sam.
Wait, for which, what was the comment again?
Or
For
the viewer we lost was stand up. Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
was John's
John
mom.
Trainer's mom.
Yeah.
That's funny. Cool.
John's
We
mom
closing-
was the viewer who left.
Yes. So the way I knew she was watching Dan, she actually loved the bit about the bells. So well done.
I think Father Steve, Kevin
I'm
and I
too
take
glad
turns
that I
doing
wanted to mention that. Sick.
Mary Kate, are we up on Spotify?
Yeah. I don't know if the Spotify. We're up on Google Play. I got the email today. I don't know if Spotify will send me a confirmation email, but you should look. I think actually, yeah, I do think we're up.
We are. I'm searching right now. We are on Spotify.
Ooh.
Hey.
Wow.
You guys
So if you-
repicked. We are the only podcast out there called the Chicago Inquisition.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Wow.
Yeah, this is
So
good.
finally, to
And-
bring everything full circle, would you recommend listening to this as a source of media?
yeah, so go, subscribe, share, go rate our podcast and review. Leave us a review.
Yeah, so we are
There's
we are
only
now on
there's 6 of us, but only 2 people have reviewed or rated the podcast on
Rate,
Apple.
review, smash that like button. Come on, folks.
Hey, John's mom, we want you to comment on how we did today.
Oh, I'll hear all about it, I'm sure.
Someday we'll find it. The Rainbow Connection. The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
That was pretty good, Zach.
Dee-da-da-da.
That was pretty good.
My heart, there's
That's
so
beautiful.
many
That sounds like
songs about rainbows.
you're trying to sound like Kermit the Frog, right?
Trying to sound.
It's
Yes,
not
he sounds.
green.
And it's cut
Just end it.
In
Put a
your-
bullet
what?
in the head of the horse.
I would suggest everyone check their text messages right now.
What?
gotta
Our
read.
podcast.
No. What did you do?
Oh,
Just leave a comment on
I didn't do it. I didn't do anything.
leave a comment on Spotify. Yay!
I'm muting Dan.
And
Dan's
green.
muted now. Mute.
oh.
Unmuted.
Oh. The undisputed meme master.
Dang it.
Intervention.
Yes.
You know, guys, I've made a lot of memes about Mary Kate, and I've never actually gotten to see her face when she reacts to this. So this is
Oh.
a precious moment right here, guys. Can we just savor this?
Was it everything you imagined?
Uh,
Actually, actually, Dan, when you send me memes and I respond and say things like ha 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 ha, ha, this is really the face I'm making.
All right. Should we end in prayer?
Is that not funny? Is that cool?
Stand for the creed.
and on that note, stand for the creed, everybody.
All right, who's gonna pray?
We're all gonna pray. But
Not
who's gonna
me, because I
lead?
might accidentally use a Kermit voice.
Oh my gosh, I might have to take out the last 5 minutes of this.
No, you're not. This is
If you
saying.
didn't take out the 10 minutes of me and Kevin, why would you take out the last 5 minutes of this?
Yeah.
That
Oh
was
my gosh, because that was so
gold.
funny.
By the way,
I am not kidding. When you said the thing about I didn't tell you to lick the can, I was like choking laughing. So that, and then when you guys were talking about sushi, actually the funniest thing was you guys were talking about sushi, and then I listened to that and I was like, this is so funny, like choking laughing. And I thought all of it was like totally like pure irony. And then the next day I had to write that bio about Kevin. And so I went on to the Mundelein page and it actually says his favorite food is sushi. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's all real. Wow. I'm super, yeah, that was good. All right, guys. Who's going to pray?
Who
Who's
hasn't
going to
led
lead
us
us
in
in
prayer?
prayer?
In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for bringing us together. We ask for prayers for all those who are ill and suffering in this world right now, those who are lonely, those who are disconnected and isolated. We ask for the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary over all of us and her Holy Mother and her Holy Church, as we pray, Hail Mary, full of grace,
Full of
the Lord
grace.
is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
All right. Well done, everybody. Episode 3 in the books.
Boom.
Why did Sam Gans said, never mind, I'm not going to say it.
Kevin O'Malley did not leave a comment.
Yeah.
No
Oh.
comments from Kevin O'Malley today. That's very
Wow.
sad.
He's doing something really important.
Oh, man. Yeah,
He's doing something really important.
He must be.
He must
Making
be.
memes or
Oh.
something.
Right.
That would be the only reason that he wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
Right, that makes
So
sense.
tune in next week. It is TBD on the topic, I think. But
Hey, and shameless plug on Wednesday at 8:15 p.m.
whoa.
Whoa.
Me, Marie, Jackie, and Pri are doing
Yeah.
a women's live stream.
Oh, I
Guess who's going to be in the comments for that one?
It is going to be. I'm so excited.
Yes.
So excited.
It's going to
Sounds great.
be.
We decided to just like get it out of the way right off the bat, and we're just going to talk about like, oh, never mind, I'm not going to say.
You
No, I
should
did-
continue. Yeah.
No, keep it a surprise. Keep it a
Yeah.
surprise.
Okay.
I want to be floored.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
Aliens, well, bye guys. Are you
Goodbye.
all gonna hang out and wait and see if I actually close the meeting or not?
Maybe.
Figured it out.
Well, there's a question to be.
No.
If you can turn it off. If you didn't turn off YouTube, I think as soon as you do that, then it.
I could just take us off live.
That is an option.
Whatever.
Right.
I'm just gonna end it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye guys.
All right.
Bye.
See you.